Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of Man We Need to Talk, the podcast that focuses on male mental health and the stigmas that are still attached to it in today's society. I'm so pleased today to be joined by Tom Pace, founder of Unstoppable Mindset. Tom is a motivational speaker, gym owner, and has had many of his own challenges with his mental health. Thanks massively for joining me today. Like I say, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Welcome.
How have you been recently, mate? How's things for you in this mad year that's been going on so far?
Yes, it's been crazy, obviously, and it's been felt in many different ways. By myself, and it's been hard for numerous reasons, but I'm a big believer in true believer in struggle, hardship equals growth. If you're looking close enough, and I haven't struggled too much, so I can't speak. There's a lot of unfortunate people I do know that have been made redundant and so on.
Yeah,
and I think this is a time of the true tests for people on numerous reasons. I know people personally that have had marriage breakups during this time. Job losses and facing a new life, which I think we all are in some way, in some degree. So it's been an incredible learning process, and it's been hard at times for my own sort of personal reasons, but then at the same time very insightful as I've used the opportunity to kind of further self-reflect. Because obviously before I speak, about past and present, it's important for everyone listening to know that, the journey of self-discovery and the journey of kind of conquering, if you want to use that word, mental health issues is an evolving process that I don't believe ever stops. Even once you've achieved or attained a certain clarity and peace of mind, you then have to be very vigilant of the forces, shall we say, in this world that are present in everybody's lives that could easily suck you back down into a life of depression, anxiety, whatever, stress, so.
Yeah, totally. And I think to pick up on that point you just said there, Tom, you can often assume when you've got a mental health issue, like, me personally, myself, you also often assume that you're going to just get out of it one side, and then once you're there, that it's just, you're going to be okay then. You just see it as an ongoing challenge, but you always think like, once I get there, I'm going to be fine. But that's not really always the case though, is it? Like you said, it's an ongoing thing, an ongoing journey of development and, holding yourself to account, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah. And this is the true art of empowerment, which, if an individual is to start looking at whatever it is that sort of they find on their path and on their journey, because I think everyone is different. And there's so many great speakers out there, books out there, so on, videos, whatever, that could help. I think there isn't really a set procedure, I would say. I think everyone's path is different, but on that path, you have to empower yourself, and you have to learn that empowerment is taking responsibility for the things you do, for your actions, for your choices, taking responsibility for the words that come out of your mouth and your reactions to the words of others. So you can't ever attain a fixed position, because life is not fixed and the world is not fixed. And unfortunately for all of us, the battle that we're against at the moment is that we are definitely living in an age, what with the current David Attenborough program that's just been on, his witness statement.
Yeah.
And I think the general opening of humans' eyes that we're not quite living in the right way. We've not quite done the right things by the planet necessarily. That we're living in an age where there's a lot of transformations and change going on, from people starting to kind of wake up out of their own misery. But once you do, you're surrounded by a chaotic world, and it's hard to find peace in a chaotic world. And anyone that says that it's easy, anyone that just said, just don't worry, you'll be fine. You know, this is not the case. It's not just a case of don't worry, you'll be fine. It is a case of work. It is a case of great people like yourself, you know, doing great things. Once they've kind of found the light, then they're going to kind of share the light along their journey, which you are going to still be on, and which I'm still on after 5 hard years of work, which is what it has been for me.
Yeah, 100%. And I think sort of coming off the back of that, before the crisis, a lot of people often think that they're in a situation where something's guaranteed. So you might be in a career where you feel like that's a guaranteed income. But in fact, in reality, not necessarily anything's guaranteed. And, you know, I think with COVID and the situation, and a lot of people unfortunately now are going to be losing their jobs, maybe a lot of people are reflecting more on that nothing's really guaranteed, and that real strength and courage sort of comes from within rather than relying on the environment around you.
Yeah, no, I agree, absolutely. I mean, that is really, I think, the biggest message. That's the biggest message that you're going to get from life out of this situation, that nothing's permanent, nothing's guaranteed. Everything is temporary. And with that knowledge, then a logical mind is going to say, well, okay, I appreciate the things that I have. I appreciate the job that I've got, but I can't get so heavily attached on it to it. And I need to make sure that I have a resilience that I have to cultivate. A resilience is something that you have to cultivate. It's something that I've cultivated on a realization that actually life is very tough. Life has a lot of trappings, or the world certainly has a lot of trappings, things that you can fall into. And you have to be resilient. You have to be resilient against life. You have to be resilient against the sheep, which are the kind of like the people that are currently not so much awake and are just going along with the materialistic world and the pleasure-seeking world, which one by one is claiming lives. One by one is claiming lives. It's so apparent now. It's so clear
definitely.
to see.
You know, I think a lot of people fall into that trap, and, you know, I've been there myself. Well, I've just thought that the key to life is to just earn as much money as possible, and then I'll be happy. But it's not really about that, is it?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think with, you know, the best thing that comes from the term mental health, which is so broad and has a deepness to it that stretches further beyond the actual term. But the mental health awareness kind of movement, like, shall we say, has highlighted that there isn't anyone that's safe anyway. So you've got the rich and the famous, you've got the poor, you've got the middle class, people with money, people that have food on their table, people with good jobs, bad jobs. It's indiscriminate. So it really doesn't matter what you have. If someone believes that money would bring them happiness, that a job, that fame, fortune, and none of it will bring you happiness. It will only bring you a short filling for the cracks that are in all of us. And there's plenty of cracks. And, you know, really, to be honest, most of them cracks just come from the fact that we're not taught about any of this stuff. At school, by our parents, we're just not taught. So we're finding out the hard way.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I suppose this is a good point now then, Tom, to give us a bit more information about your story and how things happen for you in terms of your journey, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, before I start, to highlight that for me now it is a story. It always has been a story, but up until a certain part of my journey, the story was still very, very real. But what I've come to learn is that everything that gets stored inside the mind as memory effectively forms a story. And if you believe in the story and the story's not that great and it's filled with pain and turmoil and embarrassment and judgments from others, and then it can hurt. And it can continually hurt until you come to the realization that it is actually just a story. It is actually just memory within your mind, and none of that actually defines who you are. and in the moment, spontaneously, you can change the course of your life. And part of that change will come from letting that story be laid to rest. But so my story really is not one of any trauma. And that's obviously what's helped me see the mental health situation in a different light, which is reflected through some of my work. I had a good upbringing, supportive family, no real issues there. On reflection, after process of what I've gone through in the last 5 years, on reflection, looking back, I realized for me that the first seeds, damaging seeds that were to be planted inside my head was that of watching films as a youngster that I shouldn't have been watching. So like, you know, I'm very young and I'm watching 15s and 18s and I'm absorbing subconsciously that content. And I'm looking at like the superheroes and the male figures in the films, wanting to be like them and so on. And as innocent as that may seem, I understand now that that built up a subconscious comparison thought pattern inside my mind. So from the youngest age, I started to look at myself in the mirror and almost didn't want to be me. And at first it was harmless. It was just changing, saying, I want to look like him or be like him. And I relate this now to the damaging side of social media, because that's the menacing side of social media. Without people understanding what's going on when they're looking at, you know, content of images and perfect faces and perfect bodies, without realizing it, shortly they're starting to look at their own physique and their own face and their own hair and their own nose, and they're starting to compare like for like and say, well, I don't look like that, I don't look as good as that. And so it can be quite damaging. So those are the first things looking back that I know were a problem that were to manifest later in my teens. But generally growing up, absolutely fine, happy kid, you know, got to secondary school and again, didn't really like school, but not too many issues, few fights.
Okay, yeah.
Was uncomfortable at school, really didn't really like it due to the fact that there was confrontations quite a lot with me and other guys, but generally it wasn't too bad. I don't remember it being so troubling. I think where it all started to change for me is when I started to dabble in drugs, you know, just a general like pleasure seeking, having a laugh with your mates. So it's that journey, I suppose, that magnified and highlighted certain issues. So I believe, like looking back, because I spoke about this in public many times in talks, and people have said, so do you think it was the drugs solely that messed you up? But I say, well, no, there was issues there that I realize now that are still there, way past drugs have been, you know, drugs have gone, disappeared out of my life. And these issues are kind of deeper, darker rooted issues that stem back to certain things that I wouldn't have even thought of until I changed as a person. So what the drugs path did for me, it was just a case of smoking weed, having a drink in parks and so on. But I realized I started to build up this want to escape life. So for me, it was about escaping life. And the worst thing about drugs, I think, for anyone, is this perception that it makes life better. And that's one of the misleading traps, and one of the deadly traps of drugs, is that it feels so good. Life starts to become a little bit boring outside of taking drugs. So you're constantly looking for that next high, that next fix. And, you know, I've been open and honest, you know, but it was fun, and that's the truth. But with everything that's fun, really fun and really pleasurable, it comes at a cost. And my cost was slowly over time, from the age of 17 to the age of 19, my mental health started to deteriorate. And my resilience to life started to deteriorate. And one of the things that emerged was a serious and very dark self-loathing. So at the age of 19, I started to hate myself to the point I would get violently angry just looking at my own reflection in the mirror as I pulled myself apart and looked at my face, which was the main thing that I didn't like. And I'd just pick it apart and you know, there would just be this internal dialogue of harsh, relentless criticism. It was so bad that it got to the point, there's a residual effect even now, And don't get me wrong, it's nothing. It doesn't affect my life. But because it was so fierce, I couldn't actually go to shops and try on clothes without it being a stress. So I would be someone that would get clothes, quickly whip it on, like, look in the mirror for a second and then get out, because the dialogue was immediate and fierce. So at the age of 19, that was, I'd already got to the point where I'd had enough of that. And I tried to take my own life at 19. I took an overdose in my mum and dad's house. I didn't know how many tablets to take at the time. I just took everything out of my mum and dad's kitchen drawer and went to bed, went to sleep, and thought I would never wake up. And I was quite happy at the time.
Yeah.
And this is an important point, because I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't a sense of, that I was doing anything wrong. There was no awareness of hurting other people. The voice inside of me was so fierce and so strong that I just wanted to escape. I just wanted peace and quiet.
You've obviously got to a point where your self-esteem is so low that you've just really started to sort of despise yourself. And I think that's a real issue for a lot of men out there at the moment as well, with all the pressures in today's modern society.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. And there wasn't even as many pressures when I was 19, which was in 98. There wasn't even as much pressures, and people still can't see it. And potentially the only reason some of people can't see it is because they're currently quite happy with what they see in the mirror. But the problem is the people that are happy, even that are looking in the mirror, are still constantly adjusting, tweaking, and comparing themselves. Now, as long as the comparison and what they see in the mirror matches up to what they have in their mind as an image of what's acceptable, then fine. But as they get older and progress through the years, it becomes a different story. As we just said at the start, nothing is permanent. Looks is one of the things that are not permanent. So if you become attached to a look, or you become fixated on trying to look like someone, which is what people are doing by completely distorting their images on social media to the point where you wouldn't recognize them in person. And I've heard many people say that, especially people that have gone on dating sites. And they said they've turned up for a date and they've met someone and they're like, yeah, sorry, who are you? Oh, I'm the person that chatted to you. Oh, right, okay. And then they've just come away and thought, well, hang on, this is quite scary. So it's all just a dangerous game regardless. If you're happy or not happy, it could be a temporary, a dangerously, a temporary fix, but a dangerous one. Because when it comes to a point that you're not happy with yourself, what do? You get surgery, so on, it never ends. So anyway, so this was my demon. This was one of the demons that cast a shadow over my life, because from that day on, I was never the same. That left a deep, deep scar. And actually, when I first turned public about my ways and my past, it took me probably just over a year before I could talk about that side in public, because it still was very, very uncomfortable. And there would still be a voice that would chirp up every time I would speak about it.
Okay, what would you say was the turning point, Tom, in terms of after that, awful crisis? What was the real turning point for you, and how did that come about, would you say?
Yeah, so there was no turning point for a while. So that was 19, and the turning point was not going to happen for me until I was sectioned at the age of 36, 35, 36. So which was late September 2015. Okay, so from 1998 to 2015, I had a turbulent up and down relationship with the mind, on and off prescription medication, good times, bad times, 3 children, 1 failed relationship in that time frame, and a constant battle. The battle with myself got worse. I became a fitness instructor at the age of 21, and thought that would be my savior, but shortly found a life of steroids, which is one of the most awful things to have ever happened to me. It completely tormented me, and going forward, that was hanging over my head all my career. I had a battle with it, sought out help through the hospital to try and give up. But in the end, it got hold of me. I became addicted and didn't stop taking for 4 years continually. That was injection and tablets, until the obviously fateful and unfortunate but fortunate night in September, where I had a breakdown, and that breakdown came off the back of me just all of a sudden saying, I can't do this anymore. Threw all the steroids away, and I was taking a lot of cocaine at the time, a lot of recreational drugs. I'd had like this 3-year descent into madness after the breakup in a relationship, which was a mutual decision, but it just messed me up regardless. And then, I had my downfall. And so that was the turning point. There was no definitive one turning point as such, as in that wasn't my full awakening, because after that, it was a process that spans 5 years. And that 5 years, the first year was the hardest, but that 5 years was a case of fighting with all my energy, with everything I have, never to go back to that way of life. So I've literally step by step gone down a process of changing everything about myself, my subconscious mind, my habits, my choices, and so on.
Okay, that's really quite a story. Just sort of how you come from that, Tom, and to where you are now. If you could just elaborate a bit more on unstoppable mindset and how that came about, and how you've got to the point where you are now.
Yeah, so one of the things I started to do after my breakdown was run. Now, running's not necessarily the most significant part. One of my issues with the steroids and the whole mental health side of things was the fact that I hated myself. And I took steroids to stay at a certain weight, which was 14 stone 1 exactly. 1 pound less would be a nightmare for me. I would get angry. I'd go into this self-loathing. I'd binge eat on pizzas and whatever I could just to put that pound back on.
And that was that the effect of the steroids? Was it? And that
it was
sort
just
of thing?
yeah. Steroids warped my perception of myself. Yeah. So once I'd got big, I didn't want to not be big, because what this is the thing with the society we're living in. There's a lot of images being portrayed even currently, and girls will look at those physiques and go, "Oh wow, that's great." But they don't realize necessarily what's behind it. And some of the guys that are doing it currently don't even realize what's behind it. And that is, again, it doesn't last forever. So what the hell are you going to do when you have to lay that body image down to rest? Some people can't, and it will destroy their life. And I've known in my career a few people that have been addicted to steroids and affected by them. So yeah, I just built up a distorted image about myself. I couldn't lose weight, didn't want to lose weight. And every time I tried to do running, obviously I started to lose weight, so I'd stop. So this was a case of about putting this demon, this kind of inner issue to rest. So about 6 months after my breakdown, I decided to start running. It was about 8 months actually. And that was a process that led to the most amazing transformation. I had a sore foot at the start. I had an arthritic toe, so it seized up. I had a consultation, and the consultant told me that I couldn't run. For some reason, I came out of the hospital that day and thought, you know what, I'm going to run, and I'm going to run for my life. So I booked a run to run across cliffs of all things to do with a busted foot. And
Okay.
I ran and I ran and I ran. And I knew that it was going to be painful. I knew that I was going to have to focus on numerous aspects of training to stop the fact that my foot wasn't landing properly. Was obviously going to create certain issues up to the knee and the hip, which it did at times. So I worked around all of that and ignored the mind as it started to torment me about the weight loss. The more I did this, the stronger I got. I mean, and that's to say it lightly. It for me, it was a blessing, but something really deep shifted in me over these runs. So once I finished the first run, which was a massive achievement for me, because I'd never actually set myself a goal in my whole career to that extent of hardship. I started to notice this massive change, and that's when Unstoppable was born. Because me and my videographer at the time, we were talking about what was going on, and I'd started to turn myself around. And I think I just casually said one day, "All right, I'm feeling unstoppable," and that was kind of like the name that stuck. And we called it Unstoppable Mindset. And it was just something that evolved. It was something that it turned around my gym business, which was nearly going under due to the fact that I had a year out after my breakdown.
So you had a gym business already then, did you, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the fitness industry from 21. I had my own business from 2007. And people knew me as this confident trainer that had a good physique and so on. But this is the point of mental health. I hid it so well. All of my issues, I hid. Every darkness inside me, I hid. Every insecurity, I hid. I was full of steroids. I was doing all the wrong things. And inside, I hated myself. I criticized myself when I looked in the mirror. And don't get me wrong, there were times when I was seemingly fine, but it was borrowed. It was a borrowed fine. I was never, there was never any happiness. I was distracted from time to time when I thought I looked good, distracted in my weight training, distracted in, whatever it was I was doing. When that all came to an end, there was a completely broken man underneath it all that literally just collapsed, and collapsed in a week. When I made the decision to stop taking steroids, I was sectioned 7 days later. I completely collapsed. And it took me a long, long time to rebuild myself. So obviously the running was key. I did a lot more running after that, but with the bad foot, I broke it, I fractured it. So running was something that I had to let go of, which I did. And Unstoppable Mindset continued. Me and my friend, we did a video podcast, which we put on YouTube about my story, similar to what I'm saying now. Oh yeah. And then that got noticed by someone at Balfour Beatty. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, spontaneously, I was speaking in front of 200 people. And then all of a sudden I had a speaking, not career as such, but another element to my career, which was speaking in front of the construction industry, which is a dark situation in itself. So it's been, Tom, an amazing process, but very tough.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds completely amazing. A couple of things that I wanted to pick up on is you just said about sort of doing some public speaking. Is that something that you've done in different industries or mainly just construction industry so far?
Well, I decided to do a lifestyle seminar, which would have been at the start of 2016, because that's when I started to really realize the benefit of lifestyle change. Because alongside the running, I started to really tweak my lifestyle, much cleaner food and so on, which funnily enough as a trainer was never the case for me. So I did a lifestyle seminar in 2016, and it was really hard hitting why wait till it's too late kind of a seminar, which is what I did. So a lot of people now, we're living in an age where the ignorance of humankind is this, will cause absolute disaster, and then all of a sudden wake up and go, oh shit, okay, I think I've done wrong. Yeah. And that's that ignorance of me. And because I know that I am the same as everyone else and I'm not special, because of what I'd gone through, because I realized how ignorant I was, I started really shouting at people, saying, what the hell are you doing? Like, are you mad? Like, this is crazy. And people were really like, oh, geez, man, I'm like really fired up, and they were really getting motivated. So that's how it started, actually, the speaking, which I'd never done before up until that point. And it was having a profound effect. The seminars in my gym started off with like 16 people until the following year in 2017, where we packed 110 people into my gym. And that was people from like all over the place. That was members, that was friends, that was people that I'd never met before. And people were being blown away by the message of personal disaster to triumph, and also that you can do it too. It was an empowering seminar of like, I'm nothing special. I had the darkest mind. I was weak. I had loads of issues, loads of, drugs in my life and so on. But I took it out. I changed. And if I can do it, you can too. So that's how it all began. And that's very much the theme of the construction talks that I do, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised so many people were so like overwhelmed with the message and happy with the message that you were giving out, because definitely, so many people are suffering in silence, and for someone to actually come out and share it in such a raw way is such a positive thing,
Yeah. I think that's what it is, Tom. It's just raw. There's nothing, I don't think there's ever been a time, and I think the point that I've definitely got to stress now, you're saying that is what I did was, it just felt it had to be done. It wasn't a case of like, I think I can change the world, or I think that, it was just, something felt, there was an urge to do it. And once again, in true fashion, like, it's been a really interesting part of my journey, because no matter what I've done, there's been a dialogue still of self-doubt, self-criticism, that I've just managed to ignore this time. Before, it would have got to me, but every talk I'd ever done, it would have been a case of leaving there, and then a dialogue would open up, like, what are you doing? Like, who do you think you are? No one's listening, and so on. And I've had to be so strong in myself over this time, because I've had to hold my nerve, because there's been times where I've wanted to walk away from all of it. You know, there's so much I do now that I feel even now still really uncomfortable doing. And one of those things is doing videos where I have to look at myself, because I spent years, don't forget, I'm only 5 years in, but I spent a lifetime. I spent a lifetime from teenage years up until a man. I spent a lifetime criticizing myself in the mirror. It's important to stress that things like that do not go away overnight. And unfortunately, you know, that's the work that has to be done. So people that are out there or listening to this that are facing the process of change going forward, it's a case of having a strong faith and a belief in that there absolutely is a brighter day. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It is true. But then on the way to that light, you're still going to meet your struggles and your stress. You're still going to face certain demons, and you're still going to have your battles.
Yeah, totally. And I think so many people have that internal voice, and what a lot of people don't realize was something for me anyway. Even a few years ago, I used to think that internal voice was just me, and that was the truth. That was the truth, but it's not the truth. It's the brain playing tricks on you, literally. You know, all these negative things you hear, oh, you're not good enough, you're not this, you're not like, you don't look great, or all these things. That's not real truth, is it? That's just like the mind literally playing tricks on you. It's something that you've got to overcome. And like you say, for myself, even for me, I've noticed it doesn't go away. Even now with, you know, what I'm doing this year, like even launching this podcast is putting yourself out there, and it's made me feel uncomfortable in some ways, but you just got to really separate from that internal voice, haven't you, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, well, this is it. And you have got to separate yourself. This in itself is the ultimate battle that all humans will face. The ultimate challenge that all humans will face is, can you come to understand and realize as a direct experience that voice is not you at all. It's got nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with your past experiences and your memories. And for some reason, it is the fear and the anguish and the sadness and the hurt that seems to repeat over and over again. And it is a very hard thing to step away from that voice, because it feels so real, because many of the thoughts that come into the mind start with I. So I'm worthless, I'm rubbish, I can't do this. So because it starts with I, you hear it as I and you hear it as your voice. So you can be fooled into thinking that you're sitting there almost rationally saying, I can't do this, I'm worthless, look at me, I'm just a piece of shit, and so on. But it's not. It's a conditioned, habitual thought pattern that's ingrained in your subconscious mind. The challenge of overcoming it is that the roots of it could run as deep as the age of 5 and 6. So this is the depth that people have to go. They really have to look into their own minds. They can seek help to do that. But again, it is a really individual and personal battle that has to be consistent and persistent. And that comes out of the refusal of saying, right, this voice is not me. I'm not being defined by this voice that seems to criticize me constantly.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so easy to believe that voice as well, because for years, that's what I did. I just thought that that's just something I've got to live with. And that's why I never really made any progress, because I just believed it. And, you know, from a lot of the things that I've learned from you, especially Tom, especially in your book, which we'll talk about in a moment, is that voice is just literally a load of nonsense. And it's something you have to overcome every single day. You know, and it doesn't mean that you're mad, you've got a voice in your head, 'cause it's not a voice in your head. Everyone's got that internal voice. And I suppose that brings us on as well to anxiety. For so many people out there have such crippling anxiety, it's just really, really difficult. For me, like literally, I used to get so anxious, I just avoid social occasions, because I'd just be like overthinking what people think of me. And that was all that internal voice as well. Is that something you've had experience with? I know obviously we've spoken about your mental health challenges and stuff over the years. Did you have that sort of social anxiety or different types of anxieties, or is that not something you really had?
I think, if I'm honest, I think I still have some sort of level of social anxiety. Initially, I think with anxiety, it's like you have to have an acceptance of it. I know definitely at first, and I've not been the worst anxiety sufferer, because I've met some over this last 5 years. people that are literally shaking through their hands through fear.
That's really
About
bad, isn't it?
certain,
I feel really sorry for people like that.
it's
I've been
awful.
there. It's just awful, isn't it? It really is. But yeah,
It,
carry
it,
on, mate.
tru- it, it truly is. And depression was the thing that I suffered with. But I had a serious bout of anxiety when I came out of hospital. And it was due to the medication, actually, that they put me on, which was a really strong antipsychotic medication. And that caused the worst anxiety. And I started drinking at first light. At first light, I was sinking 4 Stellas at first light to calm the feeling of dread that was in my stomach. So that was my first real taste of anxiety. So this is a huge battle. Some of the things I know about anxiety is that food can directly and almost instantly curb it.
Yeah.
And then if it is something that you face, then obviously lifestyle and therapy combined are 2 things that will work really well together. But again, yes, an understanding that beneath all of that, your mind is essentially playing tricks on you, and that's not it's a menacing game, the mind game. There's a lot that we've done, that we've affirmed, and there's a lot of past experiences that we've left unattended that have really shaped and molded us. And you have to get to a point, I feel, in your life with anxiety, and this is what I've done with the numerous one-to-ones that I've had over the years, which some of them have been really powerful. You included, Tom, and ours was just such a casual chat, and it was so amazing to hear your feedback. It's about empowering them to kind of shake the version of them. There's a version of you and everybody that lies underneath the mind. This is a fact. This is an absolute fact. I know it as a direct experience, because the person that I am, if you want to even use the word person, the being that I am is not even resembling the person that I was. There is a you that needs to be uncovered. I made a reference last night in the gym that people are like a scratch card, and they're scratching with something that doesn't work quite well. So every time they scratch off a layer of themselves, they're just finding like the £1 signs and getting the £1. But there is a gold within us all that you can scratch. If you get the right technique and you get the right coin and you scratch enough layers off, you will find your own inner gold. And this is what I try to empower people, is you cannot let your mind, which is past, everything that is contained in your mind presently is past. Even this conversation that we're having now, if we were to speak right now about the conversation, we're referring to the conversation that's past through the memory in our mind, which is past. So it's a case of you standing up and saying, I'm not taking this anymore, and I will not be defined by my past. I will not be defined by what they said, what he said, what she said, and I am going to take control of my life. And when you say these words powerfully in the moment, you start the process of change.
That's really powerful, Tom. Really, really powerful. And I've also, to pick up on something you just said about their people's experiences in their lives and stuff. What I often think happens is those experiences then form beliefs, and then beliefs form emotions, and that sort of puts the person together. Whereas from what I take from what you're saying is it's important to break that cycle, because you are not the mind. You're not actually the mind. You can actually overcome all of that. Because if you look at so many people in their lives, and even my life before included, I was just a build-up of beliefs and emotions, and that was who I thought I was. But in reality, that's not necessarily who you are, is it? Is that sort of what you mean there?
Yeah. I mean, well, in reality, who you are is potentially not got anything to do with the persona that you are. Now, currently, I talk to you as Tom, and Tom from Unstoppable Mindset, and what Tom from Unstoppable Mindset has learned. So potentially, this is more experience that I'm passing on to you, but there is a general space in every human being. And that space in every human being is the space of being able to step back away from even my name right now, in a meditation, and to step back and to see the content of my mind and to observe the content of my mind. I am aware in this moment that everything in my mind is currently past. Now, if those past experiences are good, then I will potentially use them to benefit my life, use them as good learning experience. If there is parts of the memory that past that are not so good, I can still use them to learn and to grow from. But if I am recognizing in this moment where past does not exist, in the very split moment, it doesn't exist. If I notice that I'm getting angry about something that someone said 4 days ago, 4 weeks ago, 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 5 years ago, I know that my subconscious mind is projecting past at me, and I'm not going to stand for that. I'm going to reject that as truth. I'm not going to believe in that because it's not here right now in this room with me, and it's not here involved in this conversation with us. So I try to stay, you hear all these terms, I try to stay as very present as I can. And for me, the biggest power that I'm still cultivating right now is the power of observing thought. And that is now I can see some thoughts coming in, and some thoughts I wouldn't verbalize. Some things come into my head. If I'm in a conversation with someone says something, I might hear a reactive thought come, and I'll just like, do you know what? That's not appropriate. I'm not going to say that. So there's a lot of space now between me and thought. So I definitely am at a stage where I see thought as it is, and that's thought. And I'll choose to accept or not accept.
Yeah, that's really good insights there. And I suppose often what we do is we're often living in the past, or if we're not doing that, we're thinking about the future, worrying about the future. So someone said to me that depression is usually you're just really thinking about the past too much, and anxiety is you're thinking about the future too much. So the best thing to do is just to really try and get as present as possible, isn't it? Because whatever's happened, you can't really do anything about it. What you can do is ensure that what you're doing right now is things that are really going to help you moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, you hear these words, and me 7 years ago would have said, that's just a load of nonsense, shut up. That's the type of person I was. I didn't have time for that. Yeah, I didn't have time for positive people. I didn't have a time for like, oh, past is past. For me, the voice was real. It was me. And that's how I thought. And I didn't think I'd ever change. But essentially, yes, past is past, future is future. Neither exist. Neither are worth your time. Both of those things suck your life energy from you. Both of those things stop you from being able to experience reality, which is only right now. And reality is not thought. And this is now being talked about, discovered, and researched at the highest level, even in neuroscience. And there's so many great minds out there. There's a book actually called Biocentrism, which I've read both. There's 2 of them. And most of it goes over my head, but there is some powerful science in there that are basically confirming and saying what prophets and sages have been saying since the beginning of time, before science even existed. And that was that there is something in us outside of our mind that exists more real than the mind itself. So I went a bit long there, but one of the things I want to say is the past and the future doesn't exist. Those kind of sayings, the likes of the people that say them, the great minds that say them, it's easy for you to think, well, that's easier said than done. It is easier said than done, adopting this kind of mentality of being in the present moment. It's easier said than done, but if you can find a way to do it, your life will become easier. Your life will become easier. And that's the thing. So it is easier said than done. But if you can find the strength, the resolve, the courage to face your inner fears, to try and find the realist version of you, and to try and find what reality is, which has got nothing to do with the thought process, you will start to understand what freedom from the mind is, which is something that I am experiencing, have experienced, and am growing in day by day. And it's a much more beautiful way of living, trust me, better than any drug, better than any drink, better than any social occasion. Then, I can't speak, enough fondness of this journey in that respect.
Yeah, I think to be able to be as present as possible is a really, really powerful thing. And I suppose that in today's society, that's now becoming even more of a challenge for people being present because of the likes of social media, mobile phones constantly keeping the mind busy. And if suppose you think about Facebook, it's basically a collection of things that have already happened and also things that are about to happen. So it's really not helpful in terms of getting present, is it?
No, it's not helpful. And again, I don't even want to mention it. I spoke about it so many times. The thing is, Tom, this is the fact. This is the era we're living in. You will find out for yourself. You will find out for yourself. Every individual is going to find out for yourself. If you immerse yourself in social media over 6 hours a day, so on, you are going to find out what that brings you in your life yourself. So that it doesn't matter. I can get on a high horse and a platform and shout to the world, social media is a bad thing. I've listened to all the great minds that say social media is a great thing. Social media is a growing thing. It's a growing menace. It's sucking the life out of so many people, sucking the life out of all our children. And I don't think there is anything we can do, because we have started the snowball and the avalanche effect of finding out for ourselves. We are finding out the hard way, all of us. We change our lifestyle when we have a heart attack, when we have diabetes. We start to analyze our choices and our actions when we have serious depression and anxiety. We are reflecting, but we are reflecting after the fact of disaster. And I think that this is something that will continue, unfortunately, for some time.
Well, I have to say, I definitely 100% agree with that, Tom. I just wanted to get your viewpoint on why you think it is men find it so difficult to talk about their mental health. If you could just give us a general overview as to why you think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I suppose it depends on what the actual subject is to talk about. Because, for example, I think if you can attribute your issues to something like job loss, relationship breakup, money loss, that kind of thing, that's definitely easier to talk about. But as a man, if you don't if one of your issues is that, you're struggling to perform, I don't know, in the bedroom, or you don't like the look of your face, you don't like your body, you don't like your nose, all of these things to talk about are very, very hard, very difficult, very embarrassing to us to say, because, as a man, you're just meant to kind of get on with things. But we're living in a world where there are, I think, some darker self-image issues, things that are just maybe just not the type of things that guys normally speak about, like relationship stuff, for example, as one. It's very easier to speak about a drug problem, even though, these are some of the things that are causing serious issues. But when it comes to the kind of like getting it out, it's a bit easier to be open. There seems to be some things that some men are bottling up inside. And from experience, I know that there were certain things I never even mentioned to a counsellor. And one of the things that felt so absurd to me was the stuff I felt about myself. Because when I say it out loud, it sounds so insignificant. But when the inner voice is saying it, it sounds so menacing and so persistent and so consistent. So, we're going through a change. Men typically are just, in history, the hunter and gatherers, they go out, they look after the families and so on. The world has changed completely. Dynamics of households have changed. Lifestyles have changed. We're not eating as much good food and so on anymore. So men are obviously struggling more with issues, and this has emerged quite quickly. And when I say quickly, let's even say, it's probably been, snowballing for the last 20 years, say, behind the scenes, to this now emergence in it. And we're not used to talking. We're just not used to talking. It's just not something that we've had. It's just not something we've had to do. But like I said at one of my construction talks, 100%. Like, you need to talk, and you need to talk now. And that's just the start of the process. Talking is the starting point. And then what you've got to do is you've got to be ready to address the things that you feel are causing you a problem. You've got to take responsibility of the things that may be amplifying your problem. So, for example, you have a relationship breakup, but you're wallowing in alcohol every night. This is not going to help. This is going to fuel your problems. Drugs are going to fuel your problems. They're going to magnify the inner voice, the inner critic. There's lots of things that men have to do. And as hard as we do find it to talk, the whys, I think we're just not used to it more than anything else. There's a pride in us. There's an ego in us. We don't want to feel defeated because we feel weak in the face of something that we can't see. This is the strange thing. We're weak in the face of something we can't see. It's one opponent that gives us a beating and we can't fight back. We don't actually know how to fight back. If it was me and you on the street and you said to me, "Oi, mate, will you prick?" or something like that, me and you would have it out and we'll have a fight, fisticuffs and all that nonsense, right?
Yeah.
Put it to bed. But the inner voice, that's a different nemesis. That's a different opponent. And men don't realize what they're up against. And when I've done the construction talks and told them so deeply what it is and just laid it all out, they've all come up to me, "Bruv, that's so good. That's what's going on inside my head.
Yeah.
I can't believe you just," and then all of a sudden, boom, they're talking. And it's the most beautiful thing to watch. They come off their high horse, they come off their builder, "All right, yeah, I'm all right." And they start going, "Actually, that's exactly how I feel." So it's just awareness. This is what awareness is. This is awareness will encourage us to talk. We need more like you, people like yourself, spreading the word, myself, spreading the word, keeping it raw, keeping it real, not sugarcoating it. As much as what I believe spiritually, mentally, physically, the deeper side of me, I'm still going to come out and say, "Hang on a minute, you got to fucking sort yourself out. That's it. And this is how you do it." And that's how we talk to these men and they love it and they respond to it,
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose that brings us onto it nicely about, how sort of me and you came across each other started following Unstoppable Mindset anyway, because I'd seen it on social media in 2019, I think. So I kind of was aware of your message anyway when I really resonated with it. This year, I had a real mental health crisis. Not long after COVID had happened, I had a successful events business, which then, obviously the events business was completely decimated by COVID. So I lost all of my work and all of my plans really that I had going forward. So I got super stressed and I really got depressed in myself and I didn't really speak to anyone about it. And things got really tough, and I just sort of abruptly left the relationship I was in and left the family house and didn't really give much of an explanation at the time, which is obviously not great. And after a few weeks, I was so poorly. I was so depressed in my mind. I'd never really felt like that before. And even though I had people around me to talk to, I don't know, I just felt as though if I talk to those people that they're just going to try and put their opinion in or make a judgment or something. And I wasn't overly comfortable with that. So there was a particular day where I really felt like my life was finished. Like everything was over. Like I'd lost everything. And I just reached out to you. I just messaged you and I'll never forget that like you took the time to ring me and you spoke to me for like over an hour. And you really made me realise things about what was going on in my mind and that in fact it was that internal voice and that things weren't necessarily as bad as I thought. And it really prepared me and gave me strategies to move forward. So yeah, massively thankful for that, mate. But I suppose one of the reasons why I'm going through this story is because I want people to know that I'm out there, any guys out there or anyone listening that, people go through these things, but you got to not let it consume you. And you've just, if you don't feel comfortable speaking to someone who, is close to you, then do reach out to somebody else. I mean, do you think that's a good idea, Tom, to reach out to someone outside of your circle if you're not really comfortable within it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is the thing. This is what we could say, that it's good to reach out. We could say it's good to talk. And of course it is. Absolutely. It 100% is. There's got to be an initial spark somehow in that person of fighting, of kind of like, not I'm not having this. I need to, and then whatever happens, I think will happen. Like me and you, how you like what you say, your journey of you found me on it. It had to happen that way, and it's happened for you. And I believe if in your heart you there's some earnest in you, there's like some desire to kind of not let it beat you. It only has to be a small spark, and that can trigger you to just find the right person. It might be that you're not getting the right thing from your friends, so you might look on your Facebook and for the first time find something decent, or you might like go search through some therapist and find a number, whatever. the right journey is out there for everybody. The right path is out there for everybody. And the first thing you've got to do is to not accept what's going on. Well, you made a point here, is perfect. You said I made you think that it's not as bad as what I thought it was. And there's a saying that, you know, whatever, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So basically, there is no can, can't. It's just your thought process that makes it so. There is no good or bad. Like, if you look around in any situation, you can't see things that are labeled good and bad. Your mind is labeling things good and bad. So when you have a situation of adversity that comes your way, like a marriage breakup and so on, your head will say, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to you, you worthless piece of shit. There's no point you being here. And then you're going to sit there, if you're not aware of the mind game, as a helpless bystander, and you're going to say, yeah, you're right. You're going to have this conversation with your own little inner madman. You're going to say, yeah, absolutely right. You're right. I don't deserve to be here. Yeah, go on, then go and get some tablets and let's do this. And you're going to go, yeah, all right. And you're going to be hypnotized by your own mind. You need to snap yourself out of it, and you need to take your power back, because there is always light at the end of the tunnel. With every single person I've worked with that has had massive adversity, massive anxiety, and that I have empowered them, they've changed their life. It's 90%, you know, success rate. You know, it's like, it's huge. They recognize their mind is overpowering them, and then they take the power back. And then they realize the ultimate truth, that their mind can't even exist without them.
Wow. I think that really sums it up as well. You mentioned there about the madman. I know that's the term that you've used to create a couple of videos, haven't you, about that, which are really thought-provoking and intense as well. So when you say the madman, are you referring directly to the internal voice then, Tom?
Yeah, I am. And the thing is, it started off in one seminar. I said I started listening to my thoughts on a daily basis, and I realized that 98% of my thoughts were mad. And what I meant by that, I had an analogy that, and this was part of the most amazing, the process that I went through, which was incredible. I was looking at, I diagnosed myself with SADS. So when the weather was bad, I was in a bad mood. When the winter came, I feared winter and I was in a bad mood. When the rain came, the rain. And all of a sudden I realized, hang on a minute, I'm actually resisting the fact of life here. I'm resisting the fact of life. So my main thing was the rain. So I thought, right, I'm going to set myself this challenge. Every time it rains, I'm not going to comment on it. And if a dialogue even enters my head about, it's raining, I won't verbalize it. And this went on for months, right, through the winter months, because I was running. Anyway, over a long period of time, all of a sudden, my perception of the weather, my perception of darkness and so on, and the thought process attached to it completely disappeared. And when I say completely disappeared, it completely disappeared out of my thought process. And so I came up with this thing. We had it on the T-shirts, and it was all at the gym, and it was "fuck the rain," because there's some things that you cannot change in this world, and those things have to be deeply accepted. So the madman came about at the start of that, because that in itself is mad. We're walking around going, it's raining, it's sunny. We're interpreting the world as we see it. We're resisting what we don't like. We're saying that it's raining now, so I'm in a bad mood. This is insanity in itself. And it's one of the contributing factors behind mental health, because if you're someone that walks around on a day-to-day basis and complains about everything you see, and you don't like the rain, and you don't like the dark, and you don't like the cold, and then you have a life crisis on top of it, like a pandemic, you're crushed. There's no way that you're going to survive. There's no way that you're resilient. You're crushed. So that's how the madman started. There's mad thoughts in our head every day. They're not real. And if you're not careful, and if you're unaware of this internal dialogue, then it can turn into something more sinister, like you have experienced, like I have experienced, and unfortunately, like millions of people are experiencing, a savage, dark internal dialogue that is pushing people to self-destruction.
Okay, so there's 84 men taking their lives every week in this country, and that's just in England alone.
Yeah.
And do you think a lot of that is due to this, not addressing that negative voice, that madman as such?
Well, it is only thoughts, because that's all there is. There is reality, which is silent. This is hard to understand, but I understand this is a fact. If I open my eyes, nothing is talking to me. The can of beer that sits on the table in front of me is not going, why don't you come and drink me? Come and drink me. Come on, come and drink me. Pick me
Yeah.
up. And I'll go, okay, I'll pick it up. So I'll pick up the drink and I'll drink it. And then I'll put the drink down, and the drink doesn't beat me up for drinking it. The drink doesn't say, you're a fool, I thought you were going to be teetotal, you're so weak, you've got no willpower. It's all thoughts that are inside the head. This is the underlying menace that we all face. This is one of the things that brings us all together, because the voice is not, it doesn't discriminate. The voice is inside all religions, is in all colors, is in all nationalities. It's something that we all face. You have numerous soldiers that go to war. Not every single soldier comes out with postnatal depression. And some soldiers have seen the same things. What separates the two men is what goes on inside their head and what their head is doing with that information. Someone that has post-traumatic stress, someone that has severe depression, their head, for some reason, is repeating back to them the very worst and making it as if it's a reality now. So they relive the trauma, the depression, the heartache over and over and over again. So yeah, I believe 100% that mental health is just a term for a thought process gone mad.
Okay.
Apart from, I must say just, Tom, apart from, I've been sectioned, so I've been in with some seriously ill people that are beyond this conversation, that wouldn't even understand this conversation. They have conversations to themselves with imaginary people and so on. This is some neurological, dysfunction, disorder. This is not, I'm talking about the general likes of myself that have basically not understood how this mind works. And then my mind has run ravaged my life and run rampage in my life like a Tasmanian devil. Until I knew to control my mind, then obviously I wasn't happy.
Okay, perfect. And I suppose sort of going back to earlier when I spoke about my experience that I had this year, and you really helped me through it. Obviously, a lot of the things that you told me over time, as life went on, they started to dissipate a little bit, just as they do, because your mind gets busy with other things. One of the things that really helped me was your book, Shut the Fuck Up, which you brought out. If you could just give us a little bit of information about it and why you wrote it, please.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of reasons actually. Obviously, working in the fitness industry for 19 years, I've seen people try and fail and cause themselves pure misery in the whole diet world, and body shape transformation and so on. So there was that reason, because I've heard many people talking about doing this and doing that and never being able to follow it through. And reasons of not following it through is always the same reasons, really, is that eventually their mind gets to them, they get so far, they fall off the wagon, and there's a whole dialogue that opens up, and they, self-loathing and end up going back to square one. So there was that reason. And the other reason was, obviously I wanted to share what I've learned over the last 5 years in changing lifestyle from the mind's perspective, which is how it's heavily written, is about changing your lifestyle, whether it be sorting your food out, getting healthy, trying to stop drugs, drinking, whatever. But understanding what you're going to come up against thought-wise, mind-wise along that road, because I don't believe it's possible. In fact, not much is possible unless this is fully addressed on many different levels. So the book it was quite spontaneous. Writing is a new thing for me. It's something that sort of started to spontaneously happen after my breakdown, and I've just been learning just how to spell words and how to where commas go and stuff. Still make mistakes, but again, still learning. And it's been a great part of my journey. Actually, it's something that was probably the thing I least saw coming. But I was quite proud to just finish that. I'd done it in lockdown. I'd written it before lockdown, but just decided to get it published in lockdown. And that was that. Yeah,
it's a really, really good book. Is it still available, Tom?
Yeah, it's still available. So it's just a case of messaging me and I can send out copies. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll leave some information for people for that if they'd like to buy it.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, one other thing I wanted to pick your brain on, if you don't mind, Tom, is we were talking about male mental health earlier, which is obviously what the podcast focuses on. Do you think that the change in gender roles, which has been happening over the last sort of 10 years especially, but 10, 20 years, so women are becoming more equal, which is obviously a great thing. Do you think that that's giving men a bit of an identity crisis and causing more of these issues? Or
Funny, it's a funny question you say that, actually, because I was talking about this to my clients. I had a class full of women. It was about 30 of them, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm teaching them, and I'll do like bit of motivational speaking sometimes in the fitness sessions to really fire people up. But I was reflecting on this just recently, funnily enough, you asked that. And women in the Egyptian times, even into the Greek times, but certainly in the Egyptians, if you look at the history, were revered as goddesses. So women were really well respected at that point in human history, right?
Yeah.
And it seems to be over time that men dominated society, created society, didn't create the world certainly, but they created a society which currently, if you look at the state of society, isn't that great. So men became greedy, money orientated, and women became definitely oppressed over a period of time. So their rise has caused an identity crisis in both them and men, I feel. So it's disrupted a balance, definitely, which is why you're seeing higher divorce rates. You've now got unstable upbringings for children, which could be contributing to their own mental health issues, which are rife. But I think one of the things that perhaps has happened is that, women are very powerful, that, they're more powerful than what they realize. But now it seems to be that a lot of females themselves have taken on a male role of driven for money, driven for the materialistic world and so on. And most of the women I meet and have met, they're also not happy. They're all struggling also with their own demons and inside. So I think the whole shift in the way that we do things from back in the day, and I'm not saying back in the day was right at all, where men went out, women stayed at home, looked after children. There's been a shift in that, but the new shift is also not good. So I think again, we're finding out in it, we're moving forward in a weird evolutionary way. Something is happening. And hopefully, I would say that something good will come off the back of this, but definitely not for some time. Definitely not for some time. The amount of women and men I've spoken to from broken marriages that have fallen into that, love is forever. That myth is being shattered. Women have changed, men have changed, and yes, that is contributing to the whole thing of mental health. Yes.
That's definitely true. And when you grow up, you always assume that you're going to meet a woman and then stay with her the whole time. But these days, that seems to be, with what's going on, like you say, really quite difficult to do that, without sort of divorcing or splitting up with all the pressures of everything. But people shouldn't always set that expectation for themselves either. If you're not happy at the end of the day, you're only going to make the other person miserable, aren't you? If you stay with them, you shouldn't just stay with them just because that's what you do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the thing. That's the key thing. What you're saying there is an ideal, which is, again, it's all mind based. It's all thought, future projection, image, future projection, ideal, a future projection of wants. That's being shattered. It's being shattered in all our lives. It's being shattered in the children's life, early age, when they grow up and they want their mum and dad to stay together forever. And as far as they're concerned, up until the point where the dad cheats on the mum, vice versa, or they just hate each other, up until that point, they thought the family life was what it was all about. So children's dreams are being shattered. Men's dreams are being shattered. Women's dreams are being shattered. But that's all they are, is dreams. And it's our dreams and our wishes and our hopes which are probably just not in alignment with what's natural. Because if something was natural, it would be happening quite spontaneously and flowing. Like all of nature and all other animals and everything you see flows naturally. Humans, on the other hand, are not flowing. They're not flowing with nature. They're not flowing with the world. They're fighting. They're arguing. They're breaking up. They're lustful. They're chasing drugs. They're trying to escape life, It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It's just mad how the world is really, and those sort of expectations. And again, we go back to what we were talking about earlier. about those beliefs that are formed within the mind. Not only are they formed within the mind, they're formed over generations within families, aren't they? So, and also cultures. So people think that you should do this and you should do that, and they're often working towards that goal, when in reality that might be the cause of the inner turmoil, because that's not really what they actually want to be doing. They're just doing that to please somebody else, or what, because that's what you should be doing. Do you know what I mean?
Of course, which is an oppressive way to live in itself. When you've had a religious belief forced down your throat, when you've had a cultural belief forced down your throat, but you have like maybe a more spontaneous like nature to you, and you're looking at world and you're saying, okay, well, you're telling me to believe in God, but I've never seen him. If he's there, if he exists, surely it's for me to find out for myself as an actuality, as a reality, as a direct experience. Surely it's like, you know, I always reference to Santa. This is a perfect highlight of what belief can do, because as a child, this is where you experience anxiety. If you look back to at Christmas Eve, you have a churning in your stomach, but because it's like a good thought that's in your mind, the anxiety, you accept it, but you still can't sleep. You're waking up at night, you're waking up at times. This is what belief can do. And then all of a sudden, Christmas Eve, we sleep like babies when we get to adults, because we realize that Santa doesn't exist and no one's coming. So this is what belief can do to us. We see it from the earliest age. If you believe in something, it will cause you emotion, cause you feelings. You've got to find out, is that belief a fact? Do you know it as an actual fact right now in this moment? Chances are you'll always come to the realization that no, it's not a fact in this moment. It's a memory, and my memory doesn't exist now.
That perfectly sums it up, definitely. So going back to something we spoke about earlier, you know, I know you really helped me when you called me that time when I was going through what I was going through. If there's anyone listening now that's going through a similar sort of thing, and you could give them a couple of pieces of advice, just sort of off the top of your head, Tom, you know, if they're going through a real mental health crisis, things are really on top of them. What do you think the first things is that you'd say to them?
It's such a hard one, because I don't think I can answer that. I tell you why, because this is what being present does. And this is what being in the moment does. This is what I've learned. It causes great spontaneous insight. So when I speak to you, when I spoke to you, when you contacted me, I felt to call you, and what was said to you for you.
Okay,
I had a conversation. You understand? And I had a conversation. Yeah, I had a conversation with a young girl who lost her father, and someone contacted me and said, "Would you speak to us?" And I've got no experience in grief at all, but I felt a real compulsion to want to speak with this girl who was 18 at the time, and she travelled from Winchester, which is a good sort of like 70 miles away or something or so from where I live. She travelled down, and Mum brought her down. We sat where my old house at the time. We sat in the living room. We had the most powerful conversation that left her so empowered, and she was so grateful for it, and it came spontaneous. The one thing I'll say, you know, and it's not like a cliche, there genuinely is another side to this game. You know, mental health is got like negative connotations, but you are a light yourself. You are a light to yourself. You just can't see it, because all you do is listen to your mind. You listen to your mind, and your mind is negative. So my only one thing I would say, is the only thing I probably can say, because it's broad, it covers so many things, is you need to come to the realization that you're not your thoughts, you're not your mind, and you need to understand that everything that's happened to you in your past has shaped you, but it doesn't define you. You can reshape and you can remold who you are. You just need to push yourself. And it is a case of really pushing yourself. Don't let the mind win.
Okay, that's great advice. I know you mentioned earlier about that you've done some seminars for the construction industry. I'd just like you to sort of elaborate on, from what you've learned from there, why do you think it is that in that industry it's like notoriously difficult to talk about problems?
Absolute ignorance, and I say that in the most compassionate way, because this is what I mean about ignorance. They need to evolve, as does the whole world. The construction industry is quite a scary reflection of what's going on in mental health with men, although it's the same in women, but in terms of men, and it's higher rates. Obviously, when you go to a construction site and when you talk to these guys, I've had 200 odd of them in front of me at the same time. So you're seeing all of them, and they all look the same. They all look really tired. They all look really worn out. They eat rubbish food, and this is the majority of them. Yeah, there are some in there I've spoken to that have turn their lives around, living life better, exercising and so on. But the majority of them, there was a thing. One of the sites I went to, there's a running joke: Red Bull on the way to work, Stella on the way home from work. That's what the drinking routine is. Red Bull on the way in, Stella on the way home. The night shift workers, they drink Monsters and Red Bulls. There are other energy drinks out there, guys. So lifestyle is horrendous. Cocaine is a big, big problem in the construction industry. Alcohol is a big, big problem in the construction industry. I know this firsthand by speaking to the guys on the ground, and then they're all worked to the bone, basically, long hours and so on. And it's just, and they all speak to each other. Again, this, I won't say all, because it's probably not like it everywhere, but what I have seen with my own eyes is that they speak to each other in a really derogatory way. They need to evolve. They need to take responsibility. They need to understand that they're part of the problem. The problem is the businesses themselves are running these guys ragged. They've got to play their part. And some of the construction companies are starting to make some changes. But they need to radically transform the way they run the businesses. They need to radically transform as people. They need to radically transform their lifestyles. Otherwise, it is not possible in any way to combat mental health if beer, cocaine, and fast food is going into your body. It's not possible. You just can't do it. I would like to meet someone that can. I've not met anyone that is tickety boo, happy, peaceful, calm when they're pumping all that stuff into their body. So yeah,
it's just not natural, is it? It's not natural living like that,
No.
So in terms of diet and stuff, I think a lot of people, because as everyone knows in this country, we haven't exactly got the best diet normally. It's like quite big portions and quite unhealthy food in general. How big a role do you think diet plays in mental health, like especially anxiety and depression?
It's a huge role. Early on in my process, I thought it was like the main thing, and that if you did that, you would be problem free. If you ate well, ate really clean, you would be problem free. There are many nutritionists, therapists that are nutritionists that I've spoken to that stand by that, really, as it pretty much is that way. But it's an integral part and contributes heavily, maybe even 50% to the process. You have no resilience. You can't handle stress if you're putting stress into the body. So sugar, excess amounts of caffeine. I'm talking about excess amounts of caffeine, excess amounts of sugar, fatty foods. All of this has to be broken down. On top of that, you've got all the numerous chemicals that food manufacturers put in. All of this has to be flushed out the body. So you've got a constant stress on the body anyway. So if you've got a constant stress on the body, you will not fight stress. You will not fight anxiety. You will not fight depression. So whether you like it or not, and it might be a bitter pill to swallow, you have to change your lifestyle. I definitely recommend, if you are really, determined to beat it, I do recommend at least, give yourself a year out. You know what I mean? Like, have a balance. I'm all about balance. Have a drink, have a party, whatever. Like, have a balance. It's fine.
Yeah, moderation, isn't it?
Moderation, but give yourself a year of pushing yourself, because if you spent, like I did, 19 to 36 in a bad way, you're not going to undo that just by eating a few salads and so on for a couple of weeks and a few positive affirmations and listening to a few good speakers on YouTube. You're not going to conquer it. I relentlessly for 12 months in my first recovery year, relentlessly for 12 months exercised, which was running, and ate clean. I was relentless. I cut out alcohol for a long period of time, which was never a problem for me. It was only drugs. Like I can have a couple of beers and I'm cool with that. But I cut it out completely, and I got myself to the sharpest and best place I could, and that enabled me to then learn things, apply things. Listen to speakers, apply what they said. So it is very important. Very important part of the process.
Okay. And on the internet and on a lot of these self-help pages and stuff, and a lot of the gurus and people like that, they often speak about morning routines and how that can really help set you up for the day. Do you have a morning routine, Tom? And even if you don't, what's your opinion on morning routines?
Yeah, to be honest, I am a big believer in it. So my morning routine has fluctuated. I always have liked, well, I say always. So there's always, since the, in my recovery process, I learned how to get up early. So the old me, thought process, I hate mornings, I'm rubbish in the morning, I can't get out of bed, I'm grumpy. Like, I changed all of that through changing my perception. Okay, so I since then started to get up early and just sit. So, but since lockdown, I've kind of really pushed it further. I started doing a journal. I did a journal throughout the whole of lockdown, first thing in the morning, which I thought was really nice. Writing down thoughts, feelings, ideas, just things. So I find that really, really good. And I know some people that do that. At the moment, I'm going for a real sort of a deep morning routine. I'm getting up at 4 a.m. I normally leave work at about 6:10. So I get up at 4 a.m. and I will sit listening to some 528 hertz music, which I won't go into because I can't explain it fully. But if anyone's listening, if you research 528 hertz, it's quite fascinating. So I'm up doing a bit of kind of deep meditation, if you want to call it that. And I'm finding that very, very powerful. So morning, setting yourself up for the day. Key thing is, don't wake up like an accident. Don't wake up like an accident. Don't wake up in a rush, because your subconscious mind will just bash you up. It will just bash you up. You've got to get up and then put your subconscious mind on a leash. You've got to put your subconscious mind on a leash, because if you don't, it's barking all over the place. And in fact, actually, Tom, there's something else. I'll make sure you're one of the first to see it. Me and Brooks, we're doing another little exciting project at a minute called Mind Radio. And it's just about basically, it's an analogy to help people observe thoughts as just a radio playing in the background. And it's for you to kind of turn the radio off, turn it down, or certainly just be able to listen to it as a listener. So if the radio's saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're just listening to it thinking, whatever. So I'm quite excited to share that, because in the morning, I've always found that when I wake up, open my eyes, that radio's playing loud. Yeah, so I have to set my mind. Most people say that, actually. A lot of recovering addicts I know say the morning time is the worst. The mind you wake up and the mind wants to bash you up.
I think I heard as well that apparently in the morning, the levels of cortisol is like a stress hormone, are the highest. So often when you wake up, you can get those real like worrying thoughts and stuff. I mean, me personally, in the mornings, that is often when I have the most anxiety, even though I'm starting to get hold of my anxiety. But in terms of morning routines, it's been crucial for me. Like, it's so important to have a morning routine, I think, because if you just get up and you don't know what you're going to be doing, or you've got no real plan, it's no surprise that you're going to end up hating mornings, because you're just going to not feel great about it, isn't it?
No, that's it. I mean, your subconscious mind is running all the time. It's running all the time. So if you don't have an awareness of that, and your morning routine is a conscious action, it's a conscious behavior, that's, in a loose way, it's what being present is. It's waking up and understanding in this moment, you have the ability to decide what to do, to decide to breathe, to focus on your breathing, to sit back and observe your thoughts. And as you do, let them just simmer down, because your wake up is like a boiling pot of water overflowing. So you have to sit, turn the heat down. Like you say, the anxiety's raging and so on. You have to give yourself a minute. This is what people have to do. This is what empowerment is, which is what my next book's going to be about. It's about empowering yourself. Like, don't allow the subconscious mind to run your life, because if you're not conscious, it will run your life. It will make all the decisions for you. Someone says something to you, subconscious will reply. You wake up in the morning, you want to do something good, quick little thought comes in, your subconscious mind will say, don't do it, let's go back to bed. So you've got to be really aware like that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's a really positive thing to have a good morning routine. One of the other things that we spoke about when we talked about, the construction industry was banter. Now, I wanted to elaborate on that, because my personal view of banter is, it seems to be, now, don't get me wrong, there's always a bit of light-hearted banter which you have, where you don't really personally offend each other, and it's kind of, that's all right. I think that's fine. But I've seen this banter as such in a lot of situations, and for me, it's really people saying quite horrible things but passing it off as banter. I think that's just like a really negative thing, and it like belittles people. And like you say, I've seen it in the construction industry. You know, it seems to be sort of the rule of thumb where you say horrible things about each other in the name of banter, but really you're probably hurting people's feelings by saying these things. But why do you think people feel the need to do this, like say horrible things about each other in the name of banter? Because I personally don't feel the need to do that. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I don't. I may have done in the past,
Same.
in a more ignorant frame of mind. And when I keep using the word ignorance is just mean, lack of awareness of what's really going on, lack of awareness of what's really going on. So, which is what ignorance is. But yeah, there isn't a need for it. Why someone would feel the need for it? But again, in the construction industry, this is what I mean by ignorance: lack of awareness that you're speaking to someone that has a past, and in the past, if they were bullied, beaten down by their mum and dad, beaten down by previous employers, hurt in the past in any way, and you might jokingly, in a banter way, say something about the way they look, their hair, or whatever, you don't realise that the little madman inside their head has been beating them up and tormenting them about that one little thing 24 hours a day. And that might be the thing that will push them over the edge. So it's a case of, listen, understand that every human being has a past inside, and you don't know what that past is. So you can't just go around criticizing someone for the way they look, for what they're wearing, it's just a wrong thing to do. And it's something that the subconscious mind could grab hold of, and you've said something in the morning and they'll still be thinking about it on top of all the other things they've been anxious and depressed about. They'll be thinking about it 2 weeks later, and it will just be another thing that will be added to them to bring them down. So again, the construction industry is ignorant in that sense. They don't realise that the food is causing a problem, drugs is causing a problem, and they don't realise that their banter causes a problem. But I've spoken to people firsthand, and some of them can't stand that part of the job. They hate it.
I'm not surprised. And, it's a real shame that people continue to feel the need to basically like deeply insult people in the name of banter. It's just something I feel quite strongly about. And like I say, I hold my hands up, like yourself, Tom, probably in a previous frame of mind where I've been, sort of out on the drink, and I probably have been quite mean to people before, but that would be years ago now. Whereas now I'm much more aware of that. And I think that leads us into another thing as well, is self-awareness, and being self-aware of the things that you say and the things that you do and how it affects people around you, rather than just doing it because it's what you're meant to do, if you know what I mean. I think self-awareness is key. And a lot of, from what I get from your message, a lot of it is about self-awareness anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And self-awareness as well for yourself will have a benefit. Like, so I can reflect back at school and think of people at school that I was horrible to. And I can look back on that, and through own self-awareness, I can forgive myself for it. And I can understand that I was naive, ignorant. I was very unaware. I was unaware of myself, unaware of other people, feelings, their emotions, their home life, their past. And I've since learned. So it's very important that whoever you were and whoever I was back, if there was any elements that were not so great, is that if truly that you've learned and truly you've moved on, is to make sure that you also forgive yourself as well as forgiving others for certain things. Because if you look back and say, oh yeah, but I was this and I did some horrible things, then that can stop you growing as a person. You've realized that those things are finished, they're done, they're certainly not a part of me anymore. And actually, funnily enough, through a shift in self-awareness, going up back before my breakdown, I went through this thing of going on Facebook and actually messaging people that I'd been horrible to at school. And I'd message them and I said, look, do you know what? I was a prick sometimes at school, and I'm really, really sorry for the things I said. I've changed. And they're like, wow, that's amazing, man. I'm really glad you said that. So yeah, self-awareness is key. It can bring so much positivity to your life and positivity to other people's life. You need it, absolutely. If you don't have it, unfortunately, you live life blind. You live life like a sheep, and you fall prey to drugs, drink, materialism, greed and all those other things, because that's what ignorant people do, and it destroys nearly all of them, or all of them.
Yeah, totally. And you see it time and time again, don't you? People who just let it take hold of them, and really they're not actually happy within themselves, and it's a real shame.
Yeah.
And I think that self-awareness is really important, and it's the main thing that helps get you on the pathway to self-acceptance as well, because so many people don't really accept themselves. Well, even for me, for a long time, never really accepted myself. Like, I've always trying to be something or be someone, even though I wouldn't say I've disliked myself. I'm not sure I've ever disliked myself, even though I've had low self-esteem, and I probably still do to an extent. I think accepting yourself is so important, because how can you move forward if you're trying to be something that you're not? Do you know what I mean? But so many people do that. Like, and I think that is the pressure of society, expectations, and social media. I mean, do you think that in your lifetime that you've had points where you're trying to be something you're not?
Yeah, constantly. Yeah, that was my problem. Really, it was just constant. No, there definitely was not any accepting of myself, but that's because obviously I was living life as a persona, and that persona was someone that was always trying to match up to a certain image or a certain stature, or So yeah, it's again, self-awareness is going to lead you to self-acceptance. It's going to lead you to a more peaceful way of living, as in peace with yourself. So there isn't just this kind of relationship of like not happy with what you've got, what you are, who you are, and always trying to change. That's what the mask element is that crops up in the madman. That's what that's to signify, is the mask that people wear, which is the mask that has triggered the biggest lie that we all say, which is "I'm fine." I'm fine is the biggest lie, and the "I'm fine" statement comes directly from within the mask, where people just don't want to admit that they're broken, because I think there is a knowing in all of us that to change means to face a deeper part of yourself that's very hard to face, and this is what I speak about strongly. You have to do this. You're going to have to face yourself in the mirror, and you will see things initially that you don't like. You're going to have to face past experiences that make you uncomfortable, but it all takes you to experience the light that is within yourself. Currently, as you speak from a depressed mind, that light is within yourself, but it's the depressed mind that's just covering up that light like a curtain, veil, blanket, whatever you want to say.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. In terms of like anxiety and depression, when people often go to the doctors, the first point of call, from my experience anyway, is it seems to be like medications just dished out left, right, and centre. What would you like to see maybe instead of that, or do you think that's okay as it is, or do you think that there's more that could be done and offered to people who are going through that sort of crisis, mate?
Well, I mean, when I started this process and started speaking, I had a big rant against the pharmaceutical industry. And, you'll hear many people, high-level professional people that actually have places of power, will go up against the pharmaceutical industry and completely ridicule it, but say that it's a corrupt business and so on. But I'm a bit past that, and I'd say to anyone, look, whatever you have to do initially, look, just do it. I think the doctors should quiz people about their lifestyle and about their circumstances, and have an immediate referral process towards whether it be, some lifestyle help, nutritional help, and then therapy and so on. I mean, the therapist that I've worked with over the years and speak with, and I've done a video podcast with, yeah, she's a big believer in nutrition, that sugar causes a lot of anxiety. It's and it's a known thing, it's a studied thing. So the doctors, yeah, they're quick to just give the tablets. There's a lot of research that say that they're not even beneficial. So whatever that is, all I'd say is to whoever you are, if you're going to take medication, fine, but let that be the very start of your journey, and let your journey be moving towards a life of not having medication, and a life of empowerment, and a life of taking responsibility for your actions, for your choices, for your lifestyle, for everything. Take control of your life, become self-aware, and definitely this is the answer to your problems. The true answer.
That's great stuff, mate. That's really good advice, just to real get hold of things and like I say, I'm not advocating for anyone to not take medication. I'm just always been widening the debate to see if there's anything else that they can be offered at the first sort of
Yeah,
port
of
of call, if you
course.
know what I mean.
There
Oh,
absolutely is. There absolutely is. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Tom. So I know Unstoppable Mindset is a really awesome business that's doing really well at the moment. Where do you see it going, and how do you see it developing over the years to come?
Again, not really a solid answer for that. It's been a spontaneous thing, and it's been something that it hasn't been planned from the start. The speaking wasn't planned, the writing wasn't planned. I'm currently what ideally on the creative side, in my mind, this is what I have. Probably is the only plan. The Madman, the seven, I think it was a 7 minute one we did with the train station.
Yeah, it's a
That
really good video.
that has two very, very good second pieces to it that we've not filmed. We filmed parts of like the third one. I hope that becomes a dream realised. It's been very, very difficult due to this situation and the fact there were so many of us involved that just have normal lives that pinning us down. So I'm hoping that can come together, because that as a completed piece it gives a hell of a lot of information away in a very creative way, and it shows kind of like a dark to light scenario. And then to back that up, I want to finish what will be 4 small books. Shut the Fuck Up was the first one. The Fight for You is the second one. Fire is the third, and Madman is the fourth. And all 4 of those books will all be short, quite powerfully written in their own right, or to the best of my ability anyway, and will give the reader, in the clearest possible way, everything I've learned from start to finish since having a breakdown. Yeah.
Wow, and I'm sure they'll be awesome as well, the rest of that book series. So it sounds like you've got it all planned out. But also, what I take from it is, though, you just sort of really going with the flow and what feels right, and feeding in what you said earlier about being present as well is so important. Like, not to overthink things and just go with the flow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, that's exactly what it is. It really is. That's exactly what it is. And Unstoppable Mindset has literally been created in that way, and everything's happened, has evolved. When I sat and I got called up to the directors of a company called 𝐓𝐸, and I was in the city in London, and I'm sitting there with these real intellectual guys, suits and ties, they've been to uni and this and that, project managing and stuff like this. I'm there on the rawness that we spoke about. I'm there on that. That's it. Just rawness in the moment, passion, a passion to help people see what I see, and that is that we can rise up against this thing. We really can, but we have to take responsibility for ourselves, and we can't just spend our whole life blaming the fact that our wife left us, husband left us. We can't blame the fact that I ended up on drugs because of this and I lost my job because of this. We can't spend our life blaming that. Disempowers us, and we lose the ability to live, which is our own death sentence that we do to ourselves. We give it to ourselves, our own death sentence to ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's completely true. And it's really about grabbing the bull by the horns and just not letting that internal voice take things over.
Totally.
So, Tom, I want to say a massive thank you for joining me today. This conversation has been just incredible, mate. But
been a great one.
Yeah, it's been really, really good. If we could just wrap up on if you've got a final thought or anything that you'd like to say.
Maybe I'll finish with something maybe that could be understood or not understood, potentially. But I think it feels for me right to say it. This is something that I've been powerfully or persistently looking into, not powerfully, persistently looking into. And it's definitely the reason for a continual change and a dissolving of an old ego and an old persona. And that is the madman analogy highlights the inner voice. It highlights the inner voice quite powerfully. And the inner voice is something that everybody across the world relates to. So no matter what part of the world you live in, everyone has a thought process. Some people's thought processes are not too bad. Some people's are a bit wacky. Some people's are a bit anxious, fearful, a bit up and down, bit inconsistent. Some people's are very dark, very menacing, and uncontrollably annoying. But so that brings us all together. And there is also something else that we don't realize that we have that also brings us together. And that is the dimension in every human being where a space lies. And that space is the power and the ability to observe those thoughts completely detached from them. Completely detached from them.
Wow.
And only when you detach yourself from the thought process will you then release yourself from the grip of your thought process, the thought process that brings you down. So how to find that? The first thing you do is you just start listening to your thought process. You take some time throughout the day, the evening, to sit, to breathe, and just to listen to your own mind and to find out where most of these thoughts are coming from. And that's how I will conclude.
Wow, what a way to conclude. That's a really interesting insight there, and something that I completely resonate with. So yeah, thanks again, Tom. And it's been amazing. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I just want to say I think it's amazing what you're doing. Absolutely amazing what you're doing. I love your journey's only just begun, and I love it already. It's a really great thing. From our conversation, to where you are now is wicked. So well done. Respect for spreading the love, spreading the word, and one love, man.
That means a lot, mate. Thank you so much. Cheers.
No worries.
That was episode 2 of Man We Need to Talk with Tom Pace from Unstoppable Mindset. Hope you enjoyed listening, and remember, it's okay not to be okay.